Hello, everyone. I'm Tanya Rivero. Welcome to Red and Blue. President Trump spoke to reporters about the coronavirus at the White House Tuesday, but it wasn't exactly a White House task force briefing.
President Trump returned to the podium for regular coronavirus task force briefings as his poll numbers drop and new COVID cases in the U.S. rise.
Many countries are suffering very, very, very badly. We've done much better than most.
The presumptive Democratic nominee, Joe Biden, disagrees, saying the president's pandemic response is negligent.
He's quit on you, and he's quit on this country.
On Capitol Hill, Trump administration officials and lawmakers continue negotiations on a Phase 4 relief bill that's estimated to cost at least $1 trillion. So far, Republicans are split.
I'm alarmed that we're talking about spending another $1 trillion we don't have.
Right now, the Republicans are playing a dangerous game of chicken with pandemic relief.
Republicans say they want funding for reopening schools to be the centerpiece for the next coronavirus bill. The U.S. Surgeon General says precautions taken outside of schools will be a huge factor in the timetable for children to return to the classroom.
The biggest determinant of whether or not we can go back to school actually has little to nothing to do with the actual schools. It's your background transmission rate. Folks need to wear face coverings. Folks need to practice social distancing.
Monday, President Trump tweeted a picture of himself wearing a face mask, calling it patriotic, after only wearing one once publicly.
He's tested more than anyone, multiple times a day, and we believe that he's acting appropriately.
Administration officials say a deal on the next stimulus bill could come by the end of the month. Skyler Henry, CBS News, the White House.
The administration is also redoubling its efforts to politicize the census. President Trump signed an executive order today which would exclude undocumented immigrants from being counted. The 14th Amendment requires counting the whole number of persons in each state, regardless of citizenship status. The administration's previous attempt to force a question about citizenship status on the census form was struck down by the Supreme Court. Ed O'Keefe joins me now. He is a CBS News political correspondent. All right, now, Ed, the president signed an executive order this afternoon attempting to exclude undocumented immigrants from being counted in the census. But just last year, the administration lost its battle to include a citizenship question on the census. So does today's order seem like the administration is just trying to do the same thing, but under a different guise?
It does, but it would also suggest that even by trying that, if it is challenged in court and if it ever gets back to the Supreme Court, they would remind them of what they decided last year, which is that everyone is supposed to be counted regardless of their citizenship status. This is obviously a concern of the president, immigration policy in general, but specifically accounting for undocumented people in this country. And it's unclear what is really driving this other than the president's continued focus on trying to address these issues of immigration policy that he campaigned on and that he has tried to govern or deal with from a policy perspective over the years. But yeah, it's a bit puzzling. And of course, it's been denounced by Democrats, by various immigrant rights groups, many of them calling it unconstitutional. I suspect that would be among the issues that could perhaps come up today during this appearance by the president, whether he brings it up himself or whether reporters get a chance to ask him questions.
It's also curious to me how the administration would know who answered the questions on the census might be an undocumented immigrant, because there's nowhere on the form that asks that question.
A, and B, there isn't necessarily, well, there is a list of who is a citizen, who's not, in essence, because you can check that in various ways, but there's no one system or no one way to do that. And so it's a very curious thing. But look, this move today, his continued focus on all sorts of things, all have to be seen through the prism of what's coming in November, the re-election, or his re-election campaign. And so, it's no secret that many of his supporters are in full agreement with what he did today, would want him to keep pushing for those kinds of changes in federal policy. The issue, though, is that, as you pointed out, the Supreme Court said last year that doing that kind of thing is unconstitutional, can't be done. And so today may just be a bit of an academic exercise ultimately, and we'll see what a federal court may eventually rule, or how a federal court might eventually rule on this issue.
And Ed, the vice president joined members of the White House coronavirus task force on a conference call with governors Monday. What is being discussed on these calls? Are governors still looking to the federal government for guidance, even though it seems pretty clear the federal government has said, hey, you know, we defer to you on this?
Oh, they're definitely seeking guidance. They're seeking guidance. They're seeking, declarative leadership from the president and vice president on how Americans should behave, frankly, or how they should, what practices they should be adopting as they go about their lives, especially in public. And anticipating your next question, they're also asking for a series of things that the president might do in the coming days, especially as some deadlines expire. For example, Maryland Governor Larry Hogan, who is a Republican, who has said he's not ruling out a possible 2024 presidential bid, and who has a new book out, and that's part of why he's saying that, is also current chairman of the National Governors Association. So on these calls, he usually gets called on first by the vice president when they go for comments from governors. And he's asking, as you see there, for 5 urgent things to be taken care of. The current public emergency, public health emergency that exists across the country is set to expire on Saturday, so they'd like to see that extended. A bunch of the governors would like to have their what's called Title 32 authorities extended. That's the ability to call up the National Guard. They're asking for a 30-day delay in any changes to new hospital reporting requirements. Remember that the White House said that it was taking over the tabulation of how many coronavirus cases there are from the CDC and was asking hospitals across the country to report differently. Governors here saying that's an unreasonable burden right now. They'd also like more funding and no prohibition on funding to schools placed on schools should they mandate specific kinds of education this fall that don't necessarily involve in-person instruction. And then, of course, they want Congress to do their job with the White House and pass another round of federal relief. Congress is continuing to negotiate and talk about what that package might look like. It might include an extension of the Paycheck Protection Program, those $600 relief checks that a lot of unemployed Americans are getting right now, among other things. There's also calls to include billions in dollars to the states for carrying out elections this fall, because it's going to be a little different, obviously, given the fact that many people are expected to request absentee ballots. So those are the kinds of things that can conceivably get discussed on those calls. Usually, however, based on my listening to them and talking to people who are on them, it's the vice president and people like Dr. Deborah Birx, Dr. Anthony Fauci, the Surgeon General, the HHS Secretary, talking about what it is the federal government is doing, will be doing, and what they would like to see the states consider doing. And it's been a bit of a give and take. Sometimes these governors pipe up and really demand some changes, or just like to share success stories. And often it can be that the federal officials are trying to paint a different picture than the reality on the ground, which some of the governors have pointed out in the past on these calls.
Ed O'Keefe in Washington, thank you so much for joining us.